I am Tulika Banerjee. Today, I bring you the next learning episode in BSc Forensic Science on behalf of the content writers Dr. G.S. Sodhi and Deepika Bhandari on an important unit of paper Crime in Society, that is the Positivist School, in which we will discuss about Positivist School, its history and types. We will also discuss in detail about Italian School. We will wind up this module with discussion on differential association theory. Let's start our module with a look at what we are going to learn today. Introduction and history, types of Positivist School, Italian School, differential association theory, and lastly with the conclusion. During early 1800s, public execution was a common practice. The main purpose of public execution was to create fear in society about wrongdoing and adjustment of their actions. This logic for punishment brings into line with a view known as utilitarianism. According to this theory, people are motivated by pleasure and fear of pain. Such punishments are used to serve as warning for all against commission of crime. Evolution of ideas regarding crime, criminals and their punishments started to take place in around mid-1800. Emergence of positivist criminology took place, which was related to a study of criminal behavior on the basis of various external factors. The monogenetic explanation of human behavior lost its validity with the advancement in behavioral sciences, and thus began a new trend to adopt diverse views about the origin of crime. By the 19th century, certain French authors successfully established that it was neither free will of the criminal nor his inborn depravity which triggered him to commit crime, but the real cause of criminality lied in anthropological features of the criminal. Some phrenologists tried demonstrating the functioning of brain and could ardently establish a correlation between the structure and functioning of brain along with criminality. This gave birth to the Positivist school of criminology. The promoters of Positivist school credited criminality by differentiating criminals from non-criminals into four distinct types, namely physical criminal type, mental type, psychopath type and socio-economic disadvantaged type. Three renowned Italian criminologists, namely Cesare Lombroso, Raffaele Garofalo and Enrico Ferri, supported this school, thus calling it the Italian school of criminology. Positivist school is divided into three types: biological positivism, psychological positivism and sociological positivism. Starting with biological positivism. Theory of evolution given by Charles Darwin was a scientific study which was applied to animals. Similarly, the same type of a study should also be applied to man as an animal. In this, first we have the physical characteristics. In earlier times, scientists became interested in determining the reason behind crimes. They started putting forward studies of physiognomy and phrenology. These theories became popular as they liberated society and failures of government from responsibility for criminal tendencies and behavior. According to these theories, the major problem behind criminal tendencies was biological issues, which made offenders distinguishable from law-abiding citizens. This was improvised by the Italian school and writings of Cesare Lombroso. Lombroso justified the association of Darwin's theory of biological determinism in criminal behavior. He categorized offenders into three main categories: the atavists or heredity. Lombroso referred them as born criminals. In his opinion, of a different type who could not abstain from participating in criminality, and environment had no significance whatsoever to the crimes committed by the atavists. He therefore regarded these offenders as incorrigibles, that is, beyond improvement. In this opinion, offender or the criminal revealed a decline to an early and primitive stage of mankind when individuals were inferior both mentally and physically. The second type was that of the insane criminals. According to Lombroso, the second category of criminals consisted of insane criminals who resorted to criminality due to mental illness or disorder. The third type, criminoids. The third category of criminals, as said by Lombroso, was those of criminoids who were physical criminal type having an affinity to commit crime for overcoming their inferiority in order to meet the needs of survival. The growth of genetics has created another probable innate cause of criminality, with chromosome and other genetic factors recognized as remarkable to select heredity rather than environment as the cause of crime. Though the proof from family, twin and adoption studies shows no decisive practical proof to prefer either cause. Next is about intelligence. Various studies demonstrate a link between criminal behavior and low intelligence, but these studies are quite vague as they were conducted on prisoners who were caught while committing crime, maybe because of various reasons such as failing to plan the crime properly or they were not able to deal with interrogation and admitted their crime. They are also less likely to be discouraged due to low intelligence. Other medical factors. Various hormones such as testosterone and adrenaline are related to aggression and violence. Alcoholism is one of the habits which lowers blood sugar level and leads to aggressive behavior. Adulteration and use of chemicals in various food articles and drinks have also been linked to hyperactivity and criminal tendencies and behavior. Next, we will be discussing here about the psychological positivism. Sigmund Freud divided personality into the ID, the primitive biological drives, the superego, the internalized values and the ego, memory, perception and cognition. According to him, mental illness and weak conscience are the reasons for criminal behavior. According to John Bowlby, maternal deprivation was also a factor responsible for criminal behavior. According to Hans Eysenck, certain types of personality may be more prone to react with antisocial or criminal behavior to environmental factors of one kind or another. He gave 3 dimensions of personality, that is, introversion or extroversion, psychotism and neuroticism. He said that personality is the settled framework of reference within which a person addresses the current situation and decides how to behave. Therefore, once habituated into a criminal lifestyle, the significant personality traits are likely to persist until a countervailing conditioning force re-establishes standard social inhibitions. The third type of positivism is the sociological positivism. Positivist school did not accept the classical theory's belief on free will and wanted to identify positive causes responsible for criminal tendencies. Sociological positivism identifies that the main cause is society. According to Emile Durkheim, society is a social phenomenon. Crime is a normal part of this healthy society. Whenever someone tries to push the boundaries set by the society, he or she will be termed as deviant. Pushing the set boundaries to determine the limits of morality and acceptability is deviancy. First, we have Cesare Lombroso, 1836 to 1909. Lombroso, from the Italian school of criminological thoughts, who is regarded as the originator of modern criminology, first attempted to recognize the personality of criminals in physical terms. He was educated in medicine and became a specialist in psychiatry. He handled the mentally distressed soldiers in military for a while, but later he got associated with the University of Turin. L'uomo delinquente, meaning the criminal man, was Lombroso's first published work in 1876, which consisted of 252 pages. Its fifth edition consisted of 1903 pages and was published in the year 1897. Lombroso employed scientific methods to explain criminal behavior by shifting the importance from crime to criminal. Through his anthropological experiments, he implemented a pragmatic and objective approach to the study of criminals. On intensively studying the physical traits of his patients and later on offenders, he strongly concluded that offenders were physically inferior in their standard of growth. Hence, they developed a tendency for inferior acts. He further simplified that criminals have little consideration for others' sufferings as they are less responsive to pain. On the basis of his anthropological and biological research on criminals, Lombroso justified the association of Darwin's theory of biological determinism in criminal behavior. He categorized offenders into three main categories. First, the atavists or heredity. Lombroso referred them as born criminals. In his opinion, of a different type who could not abstain from participating in criminality and environment had no significance whatsoever to the crimes committed by the atavists. He therefore regarded these offenders as incorrigibles, that is, beyond improvement. In his opinion, offender or the criminal revealed a decline to an early and primitive stage of mankind when individuals were inferior both mentally and physically. There was resemblance of apes and ape-like characteristics. Lombroso's theory used physical characteristics as markers of criminality. He specified up to 16 physical deformities of a crime, including unusual size and shape of the head, eye, fleshy lips, abnormal teeth, long or flat chin, retreating forehead, enlarged jaw and cheekbones, dark skin, twisted nose, and so on. Though he restrained his theory of physical variance soon after, but throughout his work he laid emphasis on human physical trait, including biology, psychology, and environment. In 1906, he modified his theory of atavism and stated that only one-third of all offenders were born criminals. Finally, he accepted that his theory of atavism was unjustified. Enrico Ferri subsequently challenged Lombroso's theory of atavism by demonstrating that it was incorrect to think that criminals were incorrigible. He believed that just as non-criminals could commit crimes if located in beneficial circumstances, the criminals could refrain from criminality in healthy and crime-free surroundings. Second, insane criminals. According to Lombroso, the second category of criminals consisted of insane criminals who resorted to criminality due to mental illness or disorder. The third category is of criminoids. The third category of criminals, as said by Lombroso, was those of criminoids who were physical criminal type having an affinity to commit crime for overcoming their inferiority in order to meet the needs of survival. Lombroso was the first criminologist who made an effort to recognize the personality of offenders in physical terms. He employed scientific methods in explaining criminal behavior by shifting the importance from crime to criminal. His theory suggested that criminals were physically different from normal persons and possessed few physical traits of interior animal world. Lombroso's contribution to the growth of the science of criminology can be summed up briefly in the following words. Lombroso laid consistent prominence over the individual personality of the criminal in the occurrence of crime. This view gained favor in following years and model criminological measure devised to attain the aim of individualization in the treatment of criminals. It has been precisely said that the sociologists emphasize on the external factors, psychologists on the internal factors, while Lombroso held that both had a common denominator, the individual. While studying causes of crime, Lombroso laid greater emphasis on the biological nature of human behavior by indirectly drawing attention of criminologists to the impact of environment on crime causation. It must, however, be stated that at a later stage, Lombroso himself was convinced about the ineffectiveness of his theory of atavism and therefore put forward his theory of determinism to social as well as economic situation of criminals. This too, formulation of multiple causation theory of crime by the profounder of sociological school of criminology. Goring, an English criminologist who was among the contemporaries of Lombroso, also carried out his own researches on the psychology of criminal. After a set of comparisons between the criminals and the non-criminals, he concluded that there was nothing like physical criminal type as suggested by Lombroso. He sustained the idea that people were more or less criminogenic depending upon their physical characteristics. He opposed the view that criminality could be inherited. Catherine S. Williams has illustrated the variation of views held by Lombroso and Goring by an example drawn from basketball. If we apply the Lombroso theory to basketball players, the argument might be that they are abnormal because they are tall, whereas Goring's argument would be that they have been selected for that sport because of their tall stature. Goring, however, agreed with Lombroso's statistical and inductive method and supported the latter's outlook that offenders were usually mentally ill. He also commended Lombroso for his assertion that central theme of penology was neither crime nor punishment but the individual. Gabriel de Tarde, the renowned French social psychologist and criminologist, criticized Lombroso's anthropometric measurements, on which he formulated his theory of criminal behavior and stated a social explanation of crime. He stated that criminal behavior is the outcome of a learning process. Therefore, any assumption regarding direct relationship between physical look and criminal propensities would mean overlooking the real causes of criminality. He also criticized the suggestion of phrenologists who tried to establish a correlation between the skull, brain and the social behavior of a person. During Lombroso's demise in 1909, it became profusely clear that his theories were oversimplification of facts and rather naive. Thus, the belief that criminal is physically atavistic type lost all credibility. The conjecture suggesting some nexus between atavism and criminal behavior had no scientific basis. The modern positivism in criminology has urbanized its own logical views in which there is little scope for Lombroso's atavism. Some modern writers spoke of it as Lombrosian myth in criminology. The critics, notably Lindsmith and Levieux, even alleged that Lombroso's faulty assumptions were responsible for hindering the growth of scientific criminology for few more decades. Criticizing Lombrosian views, Professor Sutherland observed a shifting consideration from crime as a social phenomenon to crime as an individual phenomenon. For 50 years, Lombroso delayed the work which was in progress at the time of its origin, and in addition made no lasting contribution of his own. It barely needs to be repeated that the input of Lombroso to the development of criminology is by no means less significant. Donald Taft observed and commented, "The significance of Lombroso's work lied in the big power it had on criminology and penal practice. The significance of Lombroso's work is there in its scientific methodology and his rejection of free will theory." Next, we have Enrico Ferri from 1856 to 1928. One of the chief exponents of the Positivist school of criminology was Enrico Ferri. He challenged Lombrosian view of criminality through his scholarly researches. He stated that mere biological reasons were not enough to account for criminality. He strongly believed that other factors like emotional reaction, social infirmity, or geographical conditions played a vital role in determining criminal tendencies in men. Therefore, he is sometimes called the founder of criminal sociology. Ferry's major contribution to the field of criminology was his law of criminal saturation. This theory presupposes that crime is the product of three main factors. First, geographical or physical, second, anthropological, and the third one is psychological or social. Thus, Ferry highlighted that criminal behavior is the result of dynamic factors which have collective effect on the individual. In a dynamic society, according to him, social change results in dissonance, conflict, and cultural variations. Therefore, social incompetence takes place, thus traditional patterns of social control methods break down completely. Following such brisk social changes, the frequency of crime is bound to increase tremendously. The inequality of social circumstances destroys the amiable social relationships, creating a vacuum, proving to be a productive ground for criminality. Ferry's law of criminal saturation was opposed by many critics as there is only a statement that the law of cause and effect equally applies to criminal behavior as well. Ferry stressed that a criminal should be treated as an outcome of the conditions which plagued his life. Therefore, the basic reason of crime prevention program should be to remove conditions making for crime. Ferry formulated a five-fold classification of offenders, namely born criminals, occasional criminals, passionate criminals, insane criminals, and lastly, habitual criminals. Ferry proposed a rigorous agenda of crime prevention and suggested a set of measures for treatment of offenders. He emphasized that punishment could be one of the methods of improving offenders. He favored uncertain sentence keeping in view of the possible chances of inmates' reformation in the community. In his penal project, Ferry opposed moral responsibility and criticized punishment for vengeance and moral culpability. Next here we have Raffaele Garofalo from 1852 to 1934. Raffaele Garofalo was one of the three main promoters of Positivist school of criminology. Born in Naples in the year 1852, Garofalo commenced his career as a magistrate of justice in 1903. He emphasized the need for a detailed study of the circumstances and living condition of offenders. He strongly supposed that a criminal is a creative of his own environment. He was the only positivist who had vast experience as a renowned jurist, a senator, and a professor of criminal law. He therefore studied the problem of crime and criminals in an altogether different manner than those of his equals. Declining the classical theory of free will as a cause of crime, Garofalo defined crime as an act which offends the sentiments of pity and decency acquired by an average person and which are harmful to the society. He highlighted that lack of pity causes crimes against person while lack of probity leads to crimes against property. He declined Ferry's classification of offenders by placing them into four main categories, namely murderers, whom he called endemic criminals lacking emotions of pity and probity, violent criminals who are affected by environmental influences such as discriminations of honor, politics and religion, indicating lack of pity, criminals deficient in feeling of probity such as thieves, and lewd or libidinous criminals who commit crimes against sex and chastity. They have deficient moral perception. As an element of the Italian judiciary, Garofalo was familiar with the then existing criminal law and procedures in the organization of criminal justice and suggested death, imprisonment for life or transportation and reparation as modes of punishment for criminals. From his experience as a judge, he observed total malfunction of correctional measures in France, Garofalo, and was not very positive about improvement of offenders. Gabriel Tarde from 1843 to 1894. Gabriel Tarde was a critic of Positivist school of criminology. He declared that influence of social environment was most forceful on the offender's behavior and the biological and physical factors only had a casual effect on it. He highlighted the responsibility of law of insertion and imitation for the occurrence of crime. The members of society are tending to copy the behavior of their associates. Likewise, the inferior members have a tendency to copy the ways of their superiors, just as the children copy their parents and family members. Consequently, the criminal novices have a trend to imitate the acts of habitual criminals, lending them into criminality. The effect of imitation is worst on youngsters who are prone to fall on easy prey to criminality. Predominantly, the influence of movie, cinema and television is so great on teenagers that it distorts their mind and actions, eventually causing delinquency. Thus, there is substantial truth in Tarde's assertion that crime, like other social happening, starts as a trend and turns it to custom. Tarde categorized offenders into urban and rural categories and stated that crimes in urban areas are more serious in nature than those of rural places. Explaining the process of criminal behavior, Tarde, in his imitation and suggestion theory, highlighted that criminality is learned, imbibed through three distinct laws of imitation, that is, the law of association or close contact, inferiors imitating their superiors, and the law of insertion. He underlined that as the society grows and population becomes denser, the deviant behavior would be oriented more towards short-term behavior called fashion rather than custom, which signifies long-term behavior. Despite the fact that the views expressed by Gabriel Tarde were rational, they were discarded as generalization of facts. An appraisal of positive school of criminology, it would be seen that this school of criminology appeared fundamentally out of the feedback against earlier classical and neoclassical theories. The promoters of this school completely disregarded the theories of supremacy of spirit and free will on the ground that they were hypothetical and illogical. Alternatively, they ascribed criminality to physical, anthropological and social environment. The greatest input of the positivist school to the development of criminal science lies in the fact that the attention of criminologists was drawn for the first time towards the individual, that is, the personality of offender rather than his act or crime or punishment. This certainly lined way for the modern penologists to devise a criminal policy representing the principle of individualization as a method of reformation. Three positivists introduced the tactics and sense of natural science in the field of criminology. With the prevalence of positivist school, the weight was shifted from penology to criminology, and the objects of punishment were thoroughly changed in as much as retributory methods were totally abandoned. Criminals were now to be managed rather than punished. Protection of society from offenders was to be the main object, which could be accomplished by utilizing reformatory methods for different classes of offenders at varying levels. It is in this context that positivist school is said to have given birth to modern sociological or clinical school, which regards criminal as a result of his conditions and experience of life. The positivists suggested abolition of only those criminals who did not respond favorably to extra-institutional methods. The positivists accepted that there could be justifying circumstances under which a person might be forced to commit crime. Therefore, besides viewing to the crime stringently from the legal perspective, the judicial authorities should look upon the incidental conditions of the accused while determining his guilt and awarding punishment. differential association theory is based on the principle that an individual becomes delinquent because of an excess of definitions learned that are favorable to violation of law over definitions learned that are unfavorable to violation of law. Differential opportunity theory, a subsidiary theory of differential association theory, explains the concept of anomie and differential association by analyzing both legitimate and illegitimate opportunity structures available to individual. It postulates that illegitimate opportunities like legitimate opportunities are unequally distributed. Illustrations. Several years ago, an English couple went to thick forest for hunting. In the forest, their small child was lost. After searching, the couple went back with despair and sadness. The child was grown up by the wolves. At the age of 20 years, he was found by certain villagers in the forest. The boy was brought back to his parents. The boy was unable to speak. He behaved just like a wolf in all respects, that is, in eating, walking, sitting, barking, hunting, sleeping, etc. It took a long time for shaping him into ordinary man. There are several pictures screened on the subject in many languages, including Telugu in Adavi Donga, Telugu picture. Chiranjeevi was a hero. Tarzan, English and Hindi. The child was brought up by forest animals. The child could not speak Telugu or any language and was unable to communicate his feelings. The differential association theory is also based on the same principle. This theory says that when a child or person is associated with criminal neighborhood, he also becomes a delinquent. Edwin Sutherland was the main propounder of this theory. He introduced this theory in the year 1939 in his book Principles of Criminology. He said that the crime is learned through social interaction. He opined that people come into constant contact with definitions favorable to violations of law and definitions unfavorable to violations of law. The ratio of these definitions, criminal to non-criminal, determines whether a person will engage in criminal behavior. He explained 9 propositions as follows. First, criminal behavior is learned. Next, criminal behavior is learned in interaction with other persons in a process of communication. Third, the principal part of the learning of criminal behavior occurs within intimate personal groups. Fourth, when criminal behavior is learned, the learning includes techniques of committing the crime, which are sometimes very complicated, sometimes very simple, and the specific direction of motives, drives, rationalizations and attitudes. The specific direction of motives and drives is learned from definitions of the legal codes as favorable and unfavorable. A person becomes delinquent because of an excess of definitions favorable to violation of law over definitions unfavorable to violation of law. The process of learning criminal behavior by association with criminal and anti-criminal patterns involves all of the mechanisms that are involved in any other learning. Differential associations may vary in frequency, duration, priority and intensity. While criminal behavior is an expression of general needs and values, it is not explained by those general needs and values, since non-criminal behavior is an expression of the same needs and values. Criticism. There are supporters and critics of this theory. The supporters praise this theory and argue that depending upon this theory, the defects in the society can be removed, thus bringing the criminal rate to the lowest rate. However, the critics argue that there are certain demerits in this theory. First, this theory does not tell how the first criminal became as a criminal. Second, this theory depends upon the association of criminals to spread the disease of crime to others. The officers of prisons, corrections, police and courts are frequently associated with the antisocial persons. They also should become criminals with the association of such antisocial persons, whereas there are no such adverse effects on the officials. Third, this theory stresses upon small offences such as theft, frauds, etc. It fails to explain properly the homicides, burglary, white-collar crimes, etc. Fourth, it does not concentrate on the desperate need for money. The definition of crime and its evolution has been proposed by different criminologists. Three renowned Italian criminologists, namely Cesare Lombroso, Raffaele Garofalo and Enrico Ferri, supported the Italian school of criminology as proposed by them. The differential association theory was proposed by Edwin Sutherland. The theories proposed concentrated upon the origination of criminal behavior. Now, this is time for your self-study. If you want to learn more for enhancing your knowledge, you may log on to our website www.cec.nic.in for assignments, MCQs, quizzes and LORs and other materials. Till then, keep studying and goodbye.